Good day everyone, especially to our professor in CPE100 class, the Child and Adolescents and Learning Principles, Mr. Shamson Daniel. So before we moving on through our further discussions, allow us to introduce ourselves first. My name is Kyle Angelica.
Good day everyone, I am Orlin Hatchenova Brianes.
Good day everyone, I am Rian Bibakto.
And we are the reporters and freshman students from Bachelor of Secondary Education, major in Sciences. Based from the previous lessons, we are oriented on different stages and importance of genetics in prenatal development. And lastly, how the prenatal influences affects the development of a child. So, as a continuation for today's discussion, we will be delving with our new topic, which is the newborn and the infancy period. So here are the learning objectives. At the end of this lesson, you will be able to understand the importance of the general characteristics of development in newborn infants. Second, describe how to have high-quality interactions with infants and be responsible to their needs based on their reflexes. And the last one, identify the stages of physical, perceptual, emotional, language, social, motor skills, and cognitive development of the very young. Development is often described by referring to particular developmental milestones that are significant achievements of one sort or another, such as crawling, walking, or first word. Developmental milestones are presented as occurring at particular ages. Children develop at their own pace. Some children will reach a given milestone early, while others will reach it later on. And all of this is perfectly normal. So here are my content or the subtopics that I'm going to discuss with. And the other subtopics will be discussed by Miss Bactong and Miss Briones. So the first one is the general characteristics. The second one is the neonate and neonatal scale. The third one is the reflexes. And the fourth one is the physical growth. This center is the second in a series concerned with child development. The goals of this series are to discuss what is known about how children develop from birth through adolescence and to offer tips on how to use this developmental knowledge to improve parenting skills. This particular topic will survey what is known about how children develop between birth and age 24 months, and this is a period known as infancy. So what is the newborn and infancy? Infancy is defined as the first year of life after birth. So it is a period of the most rapid growth after the birth. Growth during infancy is even faster than growth during puberty. So for the first month after birth, an infant is also called a newborn. A newborn has a distinctive appearance. The head is very large and the arms and legs are relatively short. The shoulders and hips are narrow and the abdomen protrudes slightly. Many newborns still have lanugo on some areas of their body, but this usually disappears within a few weeks after birth. So when we say lanugo, it is a fine soft hair, especially that which covers the body and limbs of a human fetus or newborn baby, or the newborn child. Head hair can vary from almost no hair to a full head of hair. The stub of the umbilical cord remains for a few weeks until it dries up and falls off, forming the navel. So the umbilical cord is a tube-like structure that carries food and oxygen from a mother to her baby while pregnant. It also carries waste products away from the baby so that the mother's body can get rid out of it. So here are the general characteristics of the newborn and infancy period. The first one is the shortest of all developmental periods. Infancy begins with birth and ends with the infant is approximately 2 weeks old. So it is the time that the fetus adjusts to life outside the uterine walls of the mother after approximately 9 months. It requires approximately 2 weeks to adjust to the new environment outside the mother's body. The second one is the time of radical adjustments. Birth is merely an interruption of the developmental pattern that started at the moment of conception. It is the graduation from an internal to external environment. It is where the infants radically adjust all throughout of her or his lifespan of development. The third one is the plateau in development. The rapid growth and development which took place during the prenatal period suddenly comes to a stop with birth. There is a slight regression such as loss of weight, less strong and healthy than it was at the time of birth. Then these characteristics of plateau is due to the necessity for radical adjustments to the postnatal environment. Once the adjustments are made, the infant resumes its growth and development. The last one is the hazardous period. Physically, it is hazardous because of the difficulties of making the necessary radical adjustment to the totally new and different environment. So hazardous period both physically and psychologically. It is also psychologically, in fact, it is hazardous because it is the time when the attitudes of significant people towards the infant are crystallized and change radically after the infant is born, or can remain unchanged depending on conditions at birth and on how the parents adjust. So the second part of the subtopic will be the neonate and neonatal scale of the newborn and infancy period. So take note that this subtopic is also known as general characteristics of the newborn and infancy period. Neonate. A neonate is also called a newborn. The neonatal period is the first 4 weeks of a child's life. It is a time when changes are very rapid. So neonate, from birth up to 28 days or 4 weeks of life. This time, it is the crucial time of adjustments. They undergo instability within 6 to 8 months or 6 to 8 hours rather after birth. Neonates cannot fully adjust to the environment without the help of his caregiver. Neonatal scale. A scale was developed in 1973 by Tain Barry Brazelton for evaluating the neurologic condition and behavior of a newborn by assessing his or her alertness, motor maturity, irritability, consolability, and interaction with people. Some big ideas presented in Brazil Tain's assessment scale. He believes that children were born ready to communicate. While they may not be able to speak, the assessment looks at other forms of communication that the infant can use, such as cries, visual responses, and the body language. The assessment centers on 4 key areas to determine its results, which are breathing, the motor, control, response, and social interaction. These are very important for the baby's growth and development. The assessment also looks at 28 behavioral responses and 18 reflex responses. The infant can be tested anywhere from birth up to the 2 months at the end of the exam. There is no numerical result given since the test is more about the personality of the baby. On what is actually found is the information about how the baby interacts with the world. One example is if they don't like loud noises or how they can interact with others and if they can recognize faces. It can help determine things such as if a baby does not respond to a certain reflex, there could be some motor control issues. And this assessment can help in determining to see if there's any brain damage caused to the infant. The assessment is a great tool that parents can use to see how their baby interacts with the world and have a better relationship with the baby. So the main reason of this theory is to gear more for infants, and a lot of change and development can happen between the time. This assessment was given at the time of a child's first steps. So let's move on to the third subtopic, which is all about the reflexes or primitive reflexes. So reflexes or primitive reflexes are reflex actions originating in the central nervous systems that are exhibited by normal infants. These reflexes are suppressed by the development of the frontal lobes as a child transitions normally into a child development, or, in general term, an action that is performed as a response to a stimulus and without conscious thought. So the first one is the sucking reflex. When a newborn lips are touched, the baby makes a sucking motion. The sucking reflex begins to diminish at about 6 months of age. This reflex helps a newborn find food. When the newborn lips touch the mother's breast or bottle, the baby sucks and takes food. So the second one is the rooting reflex. If the cheek is brushed or stroked near the corner of the mouth, a newborn infant will turn the head in that direction. This reflex disappears at about 6 weeks of life. This reflex serves to help a newborn find food when a mother holds the child and allows her breast to brush the newborn's cheek, and the reflex makes the baby turn toward the breast. Next is the blink reflex. Bright light shining in eyes or clap hands near eyes, it closes quickly. It is stimulated by momentarily shining a bright light directly into the neonate's eyes, causing him or her to blink. This reflex should not become inhibited. The third one is the swallowing reflex. Food that reaches the posterior portion of the tongue automatically swallowed. So, as the neonate sucks the bottle or the breast, the food that they intake directly swallowed. Next is the Moro reflex. Take note that the Moro reflex and startle reflex are the same because Moro reflex are also known as startle reflex. So, Moro reflex or startle reflex rather, baby is held horizontally then swiftly lowered a few inches or the head may be lowered a few inches. So it is sudden loud noise causes abduction of the arms with flexion of elbow and hand remain clenched disappears by age of 4 months. So this may be a survival instinct to help the infant cling to its mother if the infant lost its balance. The reflex caused the infant to embrace its mother and regain its hold on the mother's body. The next one is the palmar grasp reflex. A newborn grasps an object placed in their palm by closing fingers on it. This reflex disappears to 3 months of age. Mature newborn grasp so strongly that they can be raised from a supine position and suspended momentarily from an examiner's fingers. So next one is the planter's grasp. Pressing the thumbs against the balls of baby's feet will make his toes reflex. It occurs by placing a finger against the base of the neonate's toes and the toes curl downward to grasp the finger. Absence of this reflex may indicate damage to spinal cord. The next one is the stepping reflex. It holds the neonate in an upright position and touch one foot lightly to a flat surface such as bed. The infant responds by making walking motions with the both feet. This reflex will disappear at approximately 2 months of age. The next one is the tonic neck reflex. When a newborn lie on their backs, their head usually turns one side of the other. The reflex disappears between the 2nd and 3rd months of life. So this is also called a boxes or fencing reflex. The arm and the legs on the side toward which the head turns extend and the opposite arms and leg constructs. The next one is the extrusion reflex. Newborn extrudes any substance that is placed on the anterior portion of the tongue. It disappears at about 4 months of age. This protective reflex prevents the swallowing reflex of inedible substance. Next is the pumpkin. When both of baby's palms are pressed, her eyes will close, mouth will open, and her head will turn to one side. Absence of this reflex or it reappears after vanishing around 3 to 4 months and it may signify as a malfunctioning central nervous system. So the next one is the Babinski. Baby's foot is stroked from heel towards the toes. The big toe should lift up while others fan out. So the Babensky, the infant responds by hyperextending the toes, the great toe reflexes toward the top of the foot, and the other toes fall outward. It generally becomes inhibited from the 6 to 9 months of postnatal life. The last one is the crawl reflex. If your baby is placed on their stomach, they will pull their legs under their body and kick them out in a crawling motion. It disappears after just a few weeks. In fact, when newborn babies are placed on their mother's stomachs, they are able to crawl up to their mother's breast and start to suckling. So the next subtopic will be the physical growth of the newborn and infancy period. Physical growth refers to an increase in body size and in the size of organs. From birth to about age 1 to 2 years, children grow rapidly. Physical growth from birth to about age 1 or 2 years, children grow rapidly. After this time, growth slows. As growth slows, children need fewer calories and parents may be noticed a decrease in appetite. 2 years old, children can have a very irritable eating habits that sometimes make the parents anxious. Some children may seem to eat virtually nothing yet continue to grow and thrive. Actually, they usually eat little one day and then make up for it by eating more the next day. So here are the physical growth or signs of physical growth of an infant. First one, a normal baby doubles its birth weight in 6 months and triples it in a year. The average newborn infant weighs 3 to 4 kilograms or 7.5 pounds and it's about 51 centimeter or 20 inches long. The newborn gains weight at an average of 170 to 200 grams or 6 to 7 ounces per week for the first 3 months. Growth continues, but the rate gradually declines to an average of 60 grams per week after 12 months, and so on. So the second one is the great expansion of the head and chest, permitting development of the brain, heart, and lungs, and the organs most vital survival for this. The third one, the bones begin to harden and the fontanelles begins to calcify, then brain weight also increases rapidly. And by the end of the second year, the brain has already reached 75 of its adult's weight. Take note, growth and size depends on environmental conditions as well as genetic endowment. The fourth one is the newborn infant sleeps almost constantly, awakening only for feedings, but the numbers and length of waking periods gradually increases. The fifth one, by the age of 3 months, most infants have acquired a fairly regular schedule for sleeping, feeding, and bowel movements. And the last one, by the end of the first year, sleeping and waking hours rather, are divided about equally. Newborns typically sleep for about 16 to 18 hours a day, but the total amount of time spent sleeping gradually decreases to about 9 to 12 hours a day by age 2 years. When newborns are sleeping, they are usually feeding. Breastfeeding is the recommended method of feeding infants. Breast milk is generally supplemented by other foods by the end of the first year. So during their first year, they develop many other abilities of the infancy. By 6 weeks after birth, babies typically start smiling and making vocal sounds. By 6 months, they spend a lot of time babbling. They have also learned to sit and starting to crawl. And by the 12 months, they are saying their first words and they can stand with the help and may started to walk. So that would be my topic for today. So the other subtopics will be discussed by Miss Briones and Miss Bactong.
Now let's proceed to perceptual skills. Infants' perceptual skills are at work during every waking moment. For example, those skills can be observed when an infant gazes into a caregiver's eyes or distinguishes between familiar and unfamiliar people. Infants use perception to distinguish features of the environment such as height, depth, and color. So, samtang gagrow ang bata is makaperceive siyang mga commonalities and differences between objects. Maka-adapt siya sa atong environment. Bali, ang bata, samtang kadako, ga-develop ang bata. So, the perceptual development have 5 senses: sight, sound, taste, touch, and smell. So, smell. Infants have a keen sense of smell and respond positively to pleasant smells and negatively to unpleasant smells. So, for example, pasimuta ang baby og honey, mga strawberry or chocolate. Ganahan na sila. That's because humutan sila. Ilang facial expression is nindot. Pero pasimuta na sila mga baog nga iklog, langsa nga isda, is lainan sila, bali maka-response din sila sa toa. That is because of their sense of smell. Did you know? Young infants recognize familiar odors. Newborns will turn toward a papad that is saturated with their own amniotic fluid, saturated with their own mother's milk or her perfume. So for example, ani, ang inahan sa bata ning lakaw. Sigig hilak ang bata. Ang gihimo sa igsuon sa baby, nagkuha siya sa nina siyang mama, gipatapad niya sa bata, pagkadugayan, niundang ang bata og hilak. That is because nakasense og baho ang bata, ang baby, siyang mama. Mauto ni undang. So for another example is, kuhaon nimo ang baby siyang mama, muhilak. Ibalik nimo ang baby siyang mama, muundang og hilak. That is because naga-familiarize ang bata. Og isa pa ato, dili mo parehag baho siyang mama. Muna ang bata sigig hilak nga sigig hilak. So taste. Newborns also have a highly developed sense of taste. They can differentiate salty, sour, bitter, and sweet taste. So ang baby maka-differentiate na siya unsa ang tamis, unsa ang parat. Pero ang baby dili pud na siya maka-reklamo sa imo nga, "Mang, ulay lami akong gatas." Dili pa man kay ga-develop pa man ang bata, di pa man kay istorya. Touch. Newborns are sensitive to touch. Many areas of the newborn's body respond reflexively when touched. What do you think? If babies react to touch, do they experience pain? The infant's nervous system is definitely capable of experiencing pain. Receptors for pain in the skin are just as plentiful in infants as they are in adults. Babies' behavior in response to a pain-provoking stimulus suggests that they experience pain. So yes, baka feel ang bata og pain. For example, kasi ang bata, di ba mahilak na siya? That is because nasakitan ang bata. Now let's proceed to the vision. or the sight of a baby. Vision is the less mature of all the senses of birth because the fetus has nothing to look at. So visual connections in the brain can form until birth. So the newborn have very poor vision. So for example, ani is patanawon nimo siya eye chart in the normal distance. Ang iyarang makit-an is the big letter E at the top. At birth, infants' sensitivity to fine, high spatial frequency greetings, like their acuity, is very poor but improves steadily with age. So, for example, ani is 3 months pa ang baby is di pa kayo niya klaro. In 6 months is dili pa jud gamay. In 9 months is klaro-klaro na niya. Pero kung compare nimo siya sa adult, sa vision sa adult is layo ra kaysa sa baby. Newborns can perceive few colors, but by 3 to 4 months, newborns are able to see full range of colors. In fact, by 3 to 4 months, infants have color perception similar to adults. Now let's proceed to the sound. Hearing is the most mature sense at birth. In fact, some sounds trigger reflexes even without conscious perception. The fetus most likely heard these sounds in the womb during the last trimester. For example is magpa-music kag saba kaayo din sakit kay sa dunggan. Ang baby ana is muhilak. That is why dili siya comfortable. Pero pag magpa-music kag mga soft nga mga music, example is the lullaby, makatulog ang baby. Yes, infants in first days of life turn their head toward source of sounds and they can distinguish voices, language, and rhythm. So, do infants hear like adults? Research reveals that adults hear better than infants because adults can hear very quiet sounds that infants cannot. Research shows that infants hear sounds best that have high pitches in the range of human speech, can differentiate vowels from consonants, at 4 months can recognize own name. Infants also use sound to locate objects and estimate distance. So this is the 5 sensory and perceptual development of 5 senses of smell, taste, touch, sight, and sound. So let's proceed to motor development. Motor development, the way one's ability to control bodily movements, increases as he or she grows. So children develop in 2 major areas, gross motor skill and fine motor skill. Gross motor skills emerge directly from reflexes. These are physical abilities involving large body movements and large muscle groups, such as walking and jumping. Involves the movement of the entire body, rolling over, standing, walking, climbing, and running. So gross motor skills is responsible for movements. Children are using their large muscle groups, move more of their bodies. So the gross motor skill, they are using large muscle for movements. For example, magdula siya with other children is makaprovide na siya pleasurable play situations. Creative movements, exercise, equipment, materials, and activities for all children. Next is the fine motor skills. After infancy, fine motor skills progress rapidly and older children become more dexterous because these movements involve the use of small muscle groups. These consist of small body movements, especially to the hands and fingers, such as drawing, writing your name, picking up a coin, buttoning, or zipping a coat. So, fine motor skills require more precision and hand and eye coordination. So, for example, is nagdula og stuffed toy ang bata or mukaon ang bata, they are using their motor skills. So, fine motor development, small muscle groups like fingers more precisely for things like handwriting or drawing. So, the fine motor skill are using small muscle movement such as time, practice, and experience required, sensory and muscular interplay, hand and eye coordination, coordination of two hands, controlled use of hands and fingers, sensitive to individual differences, cutting, writing, drawing, hole punches, tongues, tweezers, staplers, etc. So the motor development is the way one's ability to control bodily movements increases as he or she grows. So the child is growing up, he or she will develop and influenced by environment, social development, child interest and exploration. Now let's proceed to cognitive function. Cognitive development, growth and change in knowledge and thoughts processes. So one of the first psychologists to talk about cognitive development in children was John Piaget, who documented his theory of the different stages of children. So the first stage of Piaget cognitive development is sensory-motor stage. Sensory-motor stage describes a child's use of his or her senses to interact with their world. So for example, is a newborn baby doesn't understand what numbers are. Dili jud na siya madali-dali. But at the age of 2 years old, many children are unable to count 1 to 5 or even 10. So their knowledge and understanding has grown. So there are 6 substages within the sensory-motor stage. The use of reflexes, primary circular reactions, secondary circular reactions, coordination of secondary circular reactions, tertiary circular reactions, coordination of tertiary circular reactions. So the cognitive function refers to a variety of mental processes, including attention, perception, memory, reasoning, planning, problem solving, decision making, language, multitasking.
This is the continuation of the topic about the newborn and infancy period. The subtopics are emotional development, language development, and social and moral development. So first is emotional development. So what is emotional development? Emotional development refers to the ability to recognize, express, and manage feelings at different stages of life, and to have empathy for the feelings of others. The development of these emotions, which include both positive and negative emotions, is largely affected by relationships with parents, siblings, and peers. Infants between the ages of 6 and 10 weeks begin to show emotion with a social smile accompanied by actions and sounds that represent pleasure. Around 3 to 4 months, infants begin to laugh, which demonstrates that they can recognize incongruity in actions that deviate from the norm. From 6 to 12 months, infants can begin to express emotions such as fear, disgust, anger, and sadness, which indicate to caregivers that they are experiencing discomfort or pleasure and need attention. Or even the parents, especially that the parents are the one who molded their child. Emotional well-being during the early years has a power impact on social relationships. Children who are emotionally healthy are better able to establish and maintain positive relationships with adults as well as with peers. Social emotional development is essential to a young child's sense of well-being. Their first relationship helps shape who they are, who they become, and their understanding of the world. Infants will respond to their emotions to the degree that their parents or caregivers respond and then learn from their emotional facial cues. Next is language development. Language development is the process by which children come to understand and communicate language during early childhood. Babies and young children's language development is strongly influenced by the language they hear spoken around them and to them. When infants are first born, they do most of their communication through crying. Around age 2 to 3 months, infants begin cooing and making soft, exaggerated vowel sounds to show pleasure or excitement. By age 3 to 4 months, babies will add more verbal sounds and start to make the consonant sound of B, K, M, G, and P. By around age 4 months, babies will begin to put vowel sounds and consonant sounds together to form nonsense words. By around age 5 months, babies are learning the musical sound and speech pattern of their parents' native language, which is the language they hear the most. Around age 6 months, they begin to babble. As they continue to practice making sounds, they will begin imitating their first sound patterns. Also around this age, babies are using nonverbal cues to communicate their thoughts and feelings to those around them. They will cling to their parents or even caregivers, push them away when upset, and turn their heads when they don't like something. This allows them to connect consonant sounds with vowel sounds in ways that are used in their native language to make distinguishable syllables. As babies enter the second half of their first year, their ability to understand how language works and how to communicate continues to become more sophisticated. By around age 7 months, babies begin to taking turns speaking with others instead of talking at the same time as others do. By around age 8 months, babies begin to connect sounds they and their parents or caregivers make to actual ideas and thoughts that can be universally understood. Near the end of the first year of life, babies begin to put together all the language lessons as they've learned so far. It is important to remember that babies' receptive language is more developed than their expressive language at this point. While babies may speak few words, they are able to comprehend the meaning of hundreds more. They will begin to show this understanding as well. As babies enter the second half of their first year, their ability to understand how language works and how to communicate continues to become more sophisticated. By around age 7 months, babies begin to taking turns speaking with others instead of talking at the same time as others do. By around age 8 months, babies begin to connect sounds they and their parents or caregivers make to actual ideas and thoughts that can be universally understood. Near the end of the first year of life, babies begin to put together all the language lessons as they've learned so far. It is important to remember that babies' receptive language is more developed than their expressive language at this point. While babies may speak few words, they are able to comprehend the meaning of hundreds more. Social and moral development. Moral and social development in infants occur simultaneously. According to the theories of Jean Piaget, the trust built through the caregiving relationship sets the groundwork for future social interactions and moral responses. Infants in their first month are beginning to interact with their environment and the people in it. They enjoy being held in ways that allow them to view the faces of their parents. Infants in this age range increase their activity and social interactions. As they become more aware of their bodies, they kick with excitement, turn their heads, and grasp of objects. Infants smile and squeal when they recognize a friendly face. In 1 to 4 months also, they begin to enjoy the consistent face-to-face social interactions involved in their daily routine, such as the appearing, bathing, and feeding. 4 to 8 months, an increase in attachment to caregivers and differentiating of strangers is a significant development during this stage. An awareness of themselves as separate from others is obvious at this stage, as a willingness to be more outgoing and engaging. Around this age, these infants are very curious about their environment and are eager observers of what is going on around 8 to 12 months. The developing physical strength of infants approaching the end of their first year enhances their ability to discover their world and how things work. At this age, infants want to be involved in family activities and prefer their caregiver to be inside at all times. The amount of language they understand allows them follow simple directions and comprehend when they are told no. Moral development. Infants fall into the pre-conventional level of moral development according to the theories of Lawrence Kohlberg. This involves two orientations, punishment and pleasure seeking. Infants respond to their environment primarily to seek pleasure and meet their needs. They show joy by smiling, cooing, and laughing when they are fed, comfortable, and feeling safe. As they grow, they learn to make choices in response to punishment, such as told no or having an object taken from them. Meeting an infant's basic needs through consistent care and positive social interactions simultaneously nurtures their moral development and trust in their parents or caregivers. Thank you and good day, everyone. Thank you and good day, everyone.